A 5-year-old boy, and a prophetic angelic visitor. All this and more on this episode of Real Life Angel Encounters. Angels, we all have them. They're our unseen guides, our companions, our teachers, and they're all around us. Sometimes they make themselves known in the most miraculous ways. Join me, Level 3 QHHT practitioner, angel communicator, and Reiki master, Christy Clemens Hoffman, with stories from real people who have experienced uplifting phenomena and real-life angel encounters. Hello and welcome back to Real Life Angel Encounters, the award-winning podcast featuring people just like you who have experienced extraordinary events. I am your host, angel communicator, Reiki master, hypnotherapist, quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner, and now author, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Before we get too much further, I wanted to ask you a few small favors to help grow the show. First of all, buy the book. Real Life Angel Encounters is now a book out from O Books, and it features the best of the best stories from season 1 of this show. Next, please share the show. It's easy to do so. You're listening right now. Maybe you're on YouTube or Apple Podcast or Spotify, Pandora, or any podcasting platform. Just show your friends, your family, your coworkers, anybody that you know who knows about angels and loves positive content. Tell them about the show. Next, please subscribe or follow wherever you're listening now so that you do not miss the next episodes that come out. Next, this show is free for you to listen, but we do have costs that come out of my pocket. Donations are greatly appreciated, and there is a link in the show notes for you to make a donation. It really does help a lot. Now, speaking of show notes, do you have a story to share? There is a link in the show notes that you can use to submit your story for consideration. We are actively taking submissions, and we all would love to hear your stories. Now then, I wanted to share my own story before this interview. Now, just the other day, I arrived here at my office and took off my coat, only to find a feather on the front of my sweater. I have no idea where it came from. Isn't that crazy? My dad passed December 1st, 2022, and almost immediately he started sending me and leaving me feathers in the craziest places: inside my car, on the floor next to my table at a restaurant in Venice, Italy, on the podium at church. This is the first feather I have found on my person, and I wanted to share. In fact, when you look at the cover of Real Life Angel Encounters, the book, you'll see there is a feather on a hand on the cover. So this is a nod to my dad and the gifts that he leaves me. I thought that was pretty special and wanted to share. All right, now I would like to introduce Lon, who got in touch with me with a lifetime of fascinating stories, starting from when he was 5 years old. I think you are going to like this episode. And now we have Lon from Wichita, Kansas, with several really interesting stories. Hi, Lon. Thank you for joining me.
It's great. Thank you so much.
You've certainly had some experiences, but starting from you were pretty small. Can you tell us what happened?
So my earliest recollection is age 5, and I shared a bedroom with my sister. There was kind of a makeshift wall that kind of split the room, and we had a twin bed on either side. And I was on the side closest to the door. One night I was asleep in bed and I was awakened by a noise. And when I woke up and sat up, there was a man sitting at the foot of my bed in a little rocking chair. And of course, I was a 5-year-old kid, so I was completely freaked out by a grown adult man sitting in my bedroom. But he assured me that everything was fine. He wasn't going to hurt me. There was nothing to be worried or scared about. And so I kind of calmed down, and he started to speak. And without going into all the details of what he spoke about, in general, my recollection is that it was about current issues, world affairs, some history, different things. And when he finally sort of got toward the end, he said, listen, you're not going to understand any of this now, but in the future, you'll look back and have memories of it. It will make sense to you. And that certainly did happen. But then he got up, and as he got up, he turned to walk out of the room. And when you walked out of the room, you would exit to the right to go down the hallway. So under normal circumstances, a person would walk through the door and disappear to the right. But what happened instead is as he walked through the door, his body sort of, for lack of a better way of describing it, sort of vaporized and disappeared. And of course, I ran into my parents' room and tried to explain to them what happened. And they're like, yes, yes, son, yes, of course. You saw a ghost. Yes, son, of course. And there was no more made of it. I just didn't talk about it. And there were a few more times shortly thereafter that I had experiences like this. And I tried to talk with my parents and they just poo-pooed it. It was a different time. This was the 60s. And my dad, as much as I love him and everything, he was sort of Fred Flintstone, maybe a little bit of Archie Bunker. And he just wasn't having that. He wasn't going to have ghosts in the house. And I really didn't talk with my parents much about it after that. But it was a defining experience for me, as you might expect. And then after that, then the floodgates opened and I just kept having experiences very, very often. And I think I had described to you, I was probably a couple of years later, I was maybe 7, and an entity that appeared to be female came to me and she wanted me to go to her husband's house, to their house, which was on the next block, and let him know that she was fine, everything's okay, not to worry, and to be happy and live out the rest of his life. You can imagine as a 7-year-old, it's sort of a tall task, really. I mean, you're not really thinking in those terms when you're 7, but I promised to carry out the task. And she gave me the name of their dog and said, if he doesn't believe you, just mention our dog's name. And for the life of me, to this day, I cannot remember that dog's name. I've tried and tried and tried. I've had meditated and been hypnotized and all kinds of, can't remember that dog's name. But anyway, it was in the 60s. It was a time when I could say to my mom as a 7-year-old, hey, Mom, I'm going to ride around the block. And she was like, sure, go ahead, son. So I took off and I rode around the block and went to the house and I knocked on the door and a gentleman answered and I said, is your name? And he answered yes. And I said, I just wanted to tell you that your wife came and visited me and she wanted you to know that she's okay, everything's fine, not to worry about her and to live your life and be happy. And he got kind of cross with me and he said, why would you do that? Why are you doing this? And I said, she told me to mention your dog's name. And I mentioned the dog's name. And this was a guy who was obviously kind of a blue collar worker, tough guy. And again, it was the 60s, a little bit different time, but not the kind of guy that you would expect to break down in tears, but he did. And he promptly apologized and thanked me. And then I just went on my way. I mean, I was still in fact, a 7-year-old. So I rode my bike back home and I think we played with some friends or something.
Now, I want to go back to your first interaction, your first encounter with the man at the end of your bed.
Right.
He told you some prophetic things. Do you remember any of them?
Yes. It wasn't so much that he was telling me this specific act or that specific act is going to happen. It was more kind of in general, like talking about the nature of human interaction and like giving examples of conflicts that had occurred in the past and why they occurred, how we should strive to avoid such conflicts and some ways, he said that we could have possibly avoid conflicts in the future, talking about the nature of like politics. And my dad actually was a politician. So it was interesting.
Oh, that is very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, any of the current events were foreshadowed or anything like that. Now, who do you think that gentleman was?
I have no idea. He presented as African American. He presented as being older, probably I would say in his 60s or maybe early 70s. I remember he was really gentle and kind and was really, really concerned that I wouldn't feel scared or uneasy. He spent a few minutes just reassuring me that like everything's okay. Nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to just talk with you and share ideas with you.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Why do you think he chose to come to you?
Well, I didn't really understand at the time, but basically what he said to me and what was confirmed later by subsequent interactions with entities is that somehow there were certain people who were selected to serve as sort of guides, that they would receive visitations and that from entities, and that they were then supposed to take that information and share it with whomever it was the entity described in an effort to help that person to process grief, to move forward in their life, to achieve goals or whatever the case may be. And that I should take that role seriously. I mean, I was 5 years old. I was like, yeah, okay. It didn't really that much meaning for me, but in fact, I did take it seriously. And it wasn't long after that that I started being visited by these entities, and I would receive messages about things I should do. And I really tried to do it. Like the incident I just talked about when I was, I think, about 7, and I
Mhm.
went and talked to that gentleman. I tried to do what they asked me to do. I took it seriously. But then sometimes I would be visited. Like I remember when I was about 16 or 17, I was visited by this man, and he was a businessman, a very wealthy businessman in New York City. And he had 2 whole families. So he traveled a lot, and he had his family in New York City and he had another family in Philadelphia. And the only evidence of that was in the safety deposit box. And he wanted me to go there into his house, find the key, go to the safety deposit box, and remove the evidence so that his wife in New York couldn't find out. And I was like, first of all, I'm 16 years old.
Right.
I'm not going to New York City by myself. My parents will not allow that.
No.
And furthermore, how would I get into your house and find a key without being arrested? And then I'm going to go to the bank and they're going to let me into your safety deposit box. Be real, man. It's not going to happen.
Oh my goodness. Did you ever find out the identity of this person?
No, I didn't.
It makes me wonder what happened at his funeral.
I'm sure it was not pretty, but
No.
I'm sure his wife was going to go and look in that deposit box and find whatever evidence there was there. And yeah,
Oh no, that couldn't be pretty. And
no,
so the woman who wanted you to talk to her husband, did you ever find out who she really was?
I mean, I had sort of knew this gentleman. I didn't know him well. I mean, he was just on the next block over, and his house didn't back into ours. It was a few houses, like 4 or 5 houses down in the block from where we were. But I mean, I had seen him around, and I sort of generally knew who he was. Every once in a while, if we were riding our bikes or something, he'd be in the front yard and we'd wave or, how you doing? Kind of thing. People were maybe a little more friendly like that back then. I don't know, but I didn't really know him though. And I don't remember his name. I've had so many experiences like this that like a lot of the details of it are just, and now that I'm 63, my memory is probably not quite what it was 30 years ago. So,
This reminds me of that movie, The Sixth Sense, with Joel
uh-huh.
Osment, and him being asked to do things for people on the other side because they could get through to him because they could talk,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Does anybody else in your family have that gift?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because about a 2.5-year-old grandson, we have a 9-month-old grandson as well, but our 2.5-year-old, it was been about a month ago. My wife and I recently bought a new house, and it's an older house built in 1912. And we were just there. We have him on Thursday nights when our daughter's teaching dance, and we were just hanging out in the living room. And he walked over into the dining room, and there's a door there that into a closet, and he looked up. And then he turned to me and he said, "Papa, ghost." And he ran over to me
Oh my goodness.
and kind of nuzzled into the side of my leg. And I said, "Oh my gosh, Ezra, is it a scary ghost?" He said, "Oh, scary." And so I went over and I looked at it and I said, "Please don't stay here. You're scaring my grandson." But it wasn't scary. It was just that he was seeing a person like I did when I was 5. He was seeing a person he didn't recognize who was an adult, and that's scary for a 2.5-year-old.
Right. Any idea who that might have been?
I think it was someone who lived in that house. That's my sense, is someone who lived there. And so he watched me say, "Hey, please don't stay here. You're scaring my grandson." But she apparently continued to be there because every time he would come for the next few weeks, say, look over there and say, "Papa, ghost, Papa, ghost." And finally, I reminded him that, hey, you just need to tell her to not stay around because she scares you. And so we were just sitting there. His mother came to pick him up, and we were sitting there together, and of his own volition, walked over there and stood there and looked up and pointed his finger and said, "You scare Ezra, leave." And
Yeah.
after that, a few minutes later, he went over and looked around, and he turned to us and said, "Ghost gone."
Oh my goodness. Well,
Yeah, it's
this
pretty.
just a little 2.5-year-old kid. Even
Yes,
the spirit world can't resist that.
I know.
So, did anyone who came before you have these gifts? They say these gifts tend to run in families.
Not that I'm aware of. No one in my family, like my immediate, like my grandparents and so forth, if any of them had these kinds of experiences, no one disclosed it to me. I don't know. I gave up trying to talk to my parents about it. It was just a fruitless effort.
What did they think when you told them about these things?
You know, they're like most parents, busy trying to just make sure the house payment gets made and food on the table, and probably just, oh, yeah, yeah, kids. And I think that most kids have experiences like that, just like you often see videos of cats or dogs who have some kind of reaction to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have that perception as well that most of us as adults have lost because it was beaten out of us or nudged out of us.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, very interesting. And then did you ever find out the identity of this African American man in your room?
No, I didn't. I have no idea who he was or where he came from or, why he was the entity that was sent to me, or I just have no idea.
Interesting.
You know,
And then what he wanted to share with you and warn you about or tell you was coming. It's very interesting.
yeah, I mean, it is interesting that he wanted to share that kind of information with someone so young. And he had to know that I wasn't going to understand that until much later in life. But I had additional experiences like that where entities came to me and shared sort of broad sweeping information about the nature of science and the universe and politics and war and different things that have given me an understanding of some things in my life that I shouldn't otherwise have knowledge about. It's not something that I studied in school in any depth, but I have this sort of understanding of some things that I know. I mean, I know it comes from those experiences that I've had and not from my own investigation or discovery.
Very interesting. And again, I have to ask, why you? What did they think you were going to do with this information?
I don't know whether I can answer that question or not, but there's a lot more people like me than you think. I don't think I'm super special or anything. I think there's a lot of people who are called upon to do this sort of thing. And I know that's true because I've encountered them.
Really? Just
Yeah.
by sharing these experiences with people?
I share these experiences and then it will come to light that, like, I know 8 or 10 people in Wichita. When I've shared these stories, they report that they've had similar levels of experience.
I would love to
And
talk with them.
yeah, I could see about trying to make that happen.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I should say why I wanted to do this show and create this podcast in the first place is to let everybody know that we're not special. There's many people, like you said, who have had similar experiences and more, and that we don't have to do anything special or be anything special. We don't have to be Joan of Arc or Moses or anything like that. Everyday people are communicated with, and the other side wants to communicate with us. Just the other day, I was doing a hypnosis session and I was asking this client's higher self, how can this woman get in touch with you? How can she work with you and have a communion with you? And they said, we're talking to her all the time. We think she just needs hearing aids
That's
and
funny.
glasses too. But yeah,
That's hilarious.
it was hilarious because they are talking to us all the time. I think many of us have these experiences that we just kind of write off. I thought I heard a voice or I thought I saw something, but no, who am I? I'm not special.
Everybody's had that experience where, I don't know, you're doing the dishes one night in the kitchen and all of a sudden it feels like Aunt Mabel is standing right behind you. And like you can feel Aunt Mabel and Aunt Mabel's not with us anymore. and you turn around and Aunt Mabel's not there, but you can just like feel, and you're thinking about Aunt Mabel, and people don't, they just think, oh, well, I'm just thinking about Aunt Mabel, you know. But in fact, something I want to say is maybe interesting, I guess, that I have 2 master's degrees and nearly a PhD, and I consider myself a man of science. And I say that, and people know that about me. And then when I tell them some of these stories, well, how do you reconcile that with these experiences you've had? And this is what I usually say. If you think about a time 500 years ago, we still thought the Earth was the center of our solar system.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't fully understand things like gravity. You know, there were all sorts of things that many people still believe the planet was flat.
Right.
500 years later, we look on that now and we giggle and understand that that's complete folly, except for a few people who still think the Earth is flat. But we understand from scientific discovery that those things are not true. So the things that we don't yet understand, and back then it was the same, we view those as mysteries, as magic or whatever. Religion tries to describe those things, the mysteries of life. And if we've gained that much knowledge in 500 years from our scientific inquiries, what are we going to know in 500 years from now that we don't know now? And I think you can't just explain away these experiences offhand, because too many people are having them. So
Right.
there has to be a scientific explanation. What is it? Are you going to say we're all crazy, that we're all schizophrenic, that we're all, whatever? I mean, I don't think those are reasonable, plausible explanations if you're looking at it from a scientific perspective. I think that you have to say there's something happening. We just don't have the instruments sensitive enough to recognize it. Just like now we can see subatomic particles. 125 years ago, we could not.
Right.
And
Right.
it was just theory.
Wow. Right. 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 Once upon a time, we couldn't see inside the body to see our bones or,
Correct.
any physical structure. No. And I do feel, maybe see what you think, that science is catching up in a way, that we're understanding the quantum field, for example.
Yeah. Even more specific than that, there's an institute in Virginia whose name I can't remember, so I'll try to get that to you.
Oh, is that
But
ARE, Edgar Casey's Institute?
maybe, I don't think so. This is affiliated with the university.
Oh, yes. I've heard of this and I don't remember the name of it, but yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so they've studied this for going on 40 years. They've studied activity like this. And one of the case studies they always cite is this little boy. He was born, and from the time he could speak, he was telling his parents that in a previous life, I was killed in a plane crash.
Yes.
And you've heard this story. And
Heard the story, but please, many of our listeners perhaps have not heard it.
yeah, so I was killed in a plane crash, and he gave more and more details. He talked about the precise type of plane. It was a Corsair, World War II Corsair, which was a Navy plane, if you're not familiar. But anyway, he said it was, in an ocean, things like that. And then one day he was sitting on his father's lap. His father was flipping through a book from World War II, and there was a picture of an image of a map of Hiroshima. And he pointed at the map and he said, that's where my plane crashed. And it turns out, and he even gave his name, it turns out there was an airman or a Navy airman who died in a Corsair in that very spot during World War II.
Right.
When his plane crashed. And there's more and more of that sort of investigative work coming to light, done by people who are trained in the sciences. They're using the scientific method and so forth to inquire about these things. And I think probably not in our lifetimes, but maybe in the next 100 years or less, I think we're going to have more answers about how this works. And we're going to find out that there's entities around all the time.
They are. They truly are. But as you said before, we just don't have the equipment to perceive them, right? They're
Right.
different dimension that our eyes just cannot perceive. It was just like X-rays and gamma rays are around us all the time, and we
Yeah.
can't perceive those.
Yeah. So along these same lines, could be a very long story, but I'll try to make it a quick story.
Oh, no, please. Time.
I ran a place called the Kansas Aviation Museum for 8 years. It was renowned. Everybody who went in there had some ghost story about stuff that happened there. And
Oh my goodness.
it seemed pretty plausible because it was the site, the Army Air Corps had offices there, and any soldier that died during World War II from like northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas, their bodies, remains were processed through that building. So it seems plausible that there would be a lot of paranormal activity. We had a paranormal group that was bugging me to do an all-night investigation. And so I finally agreed to allow that to happen. And they did the investigation and they found what they called a hot spot. And it was in this one particular room, far west in the building on the lowest level. So jump forward, a very elderly lady comes in my office one day and wants a tour. And I said, oh, man, I'm working on a grant proposal. Could I get my archivist to do it? No, it has to be you. I'm not sure why she insisted, but I finally just gave up and I said, okay, I'll give you a tour. So we went on this tour, again, trying to give you the Reader's Digest version. We got to one point and she took off walking and I followed her and I said, man, where are you going? Where are you going? And she kept walking. She went down the stairs and she stopped in front of a door and she said, I need to go in this room. And I said, ma'am, that's a non-public area, and she's like, no, you have to let me in this room. Okay. So I finally unlocked the door. There was an outer room about 20 by 15. And there was a room behind that through a door that was 10 by 15. And she bolted through that door and in that back room. And by the time I got there, she was sobbing.
Oh my goodness.
And she grabbed me and she put her head on my shoulder, which made me feel a little uncomfortable because, well, I was alone in a room with a woman and she had her head on my shoulder. But anyway, she would not let go and sobbing for like 10 minutes. And she finally collected herself. And I said, ma'am, what is going on here? You have to tell me what's happening. She said, when I was 7, this was in the 30s, in pre-television, the Depression, a lot of people didn't have radio. So as a form of entertainment, on Sunday afternoon, people would go to the airport. It was the airport at that time, and they would watch planes come and go. They'd throw their blankets out on the lawn and sit there and watch the planes. So they had gone out there, her family, she and her little brother and her mom, dad, and they were just sitting there. This man came up, big man, she described him, in coveralls, and said, I'm the maintenance night watchman here, and I love to give kids tours of the building. And so the parents, oh, okay, go ahead, and so the little girl took off with the man, and I guess he gave her a tour of the building, which culminated in that room. And I don't want to go into the details of what she described happened in that room, but you can imagine it wasn't pleasant.
Oh,
Essentially, he molested her.
yes.
And then told her that if she ever said anything to anybody, including her parents, that he would kill them.
Oh, no.
So she had never told anybody this, including her husband of 50 years who had passed away recently, until that day. And she told me this story. And that was the very spot where they had found that hot spot in the building.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Did you ever find out the name of the man?
I did not. I scoured newspaper articles, but she said that he died in that room, that he had a heart attack and died in that room.
Oh,
And at another time, if we do another session, I will tell you about my experience of that person, or I can tell you now if you want me to.
go ahead and tell me now.
So from the time I started there, I perceived this entity, and it was just as she described him. It was by that time, I was 40 something years old, and I had experienced lots and lots of entities that were not in bodies like these.
Mhm.
And I wasn't really scared very often. I was freaked out. When I had to work a late night event, like a wedding or something, when I was manager on duty, I would start at the top of the building and I would run through that building, turning the lights off to get out of there. I mean, it scared, pardon me, the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And I had numerous encounters with that entity. One where I was up on top of the control tower, which was part of the building. It was 90 feet in the air. And I was spreading tar on the top of the thing to keep it from leaking. And I turned around and he was standing there and I fell backwards. And like from here up was over the edge of the building. I almost fell to my death.
Oh my
And
God.
I looked down and when I looked back, he was gone.
Wow.
Yeah. I
Just
had
like this-
numerous experiences like that.
What, just like this woman described, huh?
He looked exactly like the woman described. So when she was describing this guy to me, I was like, oh, yeah, I know that guy.
Oh my goodness.
So I stayed overnight in the building by myself one night, and I had a screaming conversation with this entity. And you've never been in that building, but where the waiting room was a 30, 40-foot high atrium space. And I was in that space and I was having this shouting like, get the F out of here. You're not wanted here. You're a molesting rapist. And these other two entities came down from above and took hold of him, and they disappeared through the ceiling and they were gone. And I never saw him again.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is wild, and how scary. What a tortured soul.
Mm-hmm.
Unhappy soul.
And you think about however many years, I mean, that terminal didn't operate for very long because it was moved later. It was purchased by the Air Force and moved. But for the 15 or 20 years it was a terminal, how many little kids did he torture in that way? I mean, it just kind of almost makes you sick to your stomach.
Oh, that does make me sick to my stomach. That
Yeah.
is horrible. I'm glad he left. I'm glad he was taken and
Mm-hmm.
the other side. So that
I'm sorry to share such a sort of a sad, negative story with you.
Sometimes these stories are like that. They're not always positive. I would say if there's anything positive from that story is that he left and didn't bother anybody again.
Yes. And what I would say to people who are, maybe some people are frightened of the possibility that there's ghosts around or entities. What I would say is, in my experience, entities are really not that much different than us in these bodies.
Right.
Most of the people that you encounter in life are good, decent people. They may have a bad day, they may be short with you or whatever, but generally speaking, they're good people. They're doing the things that you do, trying to take care of their families or whatever. They're good people. It's meeting someone of that caliber is more the exception than the rule.
Right. Absolutely. And this being real life angel encounters, I would consider the angelic portion of this is the beings that came down and grabbed him
Mm-hmm.
and took him over to the other side, right? Where he could
Yeah.
find redemption, he could find peace, he could find some healing as well.
Exactly.
These are absolutely wonderful stories, Lon. I really appreciate you reaching out. Now,
Mm-hmm.
everybody who's listening right now, it's easy to get your story submitted. You can go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/real life angel encounters. Submit your story there. You can email me also at angelencounterspodcast@gmail.com. So be like Lon, reach out and tell me your stories, and then you could be on Real Life Angel Encounters to tell them. So, Lon, I hope you will be back if you think of any more encounters that you've had, or if you know somebody that has had an encounter as well, to share with me too. And this is also something that any of our listeners can do. Talk about the show, share it with people, share your experiences. So thank you so much for joining me. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and follow, and be sure to share this episode. The more people who know about this podcast, the more great story submissions we get. Have a story to share? Email your own real-life angel encounter to angelencounterspodcast@gmail.com or visit radiatewellnesscommunity.com/real-life angel encounters podcast. Or join our Facebook group and continue the discussion. Want to know what your angels and loved ones have to tell you? Schedule an appointment with me at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. A special thanks to James Wheeler for the original music and to Tiffany Baumgarten for the logo design.